like, share, comment, and click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to our channel for more real and true stories like this. I'd never given much thought to Dr. James Harper before. He was just my doctor, mid-40s, calm and confident, with graying hair at the temples and kind eyes that always seemed to see right through me. I'd been going to his clinic for a couple of years for regular checkups, and while he was polite and professional, I'd never noticed much else about him. That changed one afternoon in late spring when I found myself sitting in his exam room again, perched on the edge of the table in one of those paper gowns that always felt ridiculous. I was there for a routine follow-up, nothing out of the ordinary, but as he came in and greeted me, something felt different. Maybe it was me. "You look well," he said, after a quick glance at my chart. "How have things been since your last visit?" "Oh, you know," I replied with a small laugh. "Busy as always. Kids, work, laundry. It never ends." He smiled at that, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "You sound like my wife," he said lightly. "She's always juggling 1,000 things at once." I nodded, suddenly feeling oddly seen. "Well, that's marriage, I suppose." He paused, leaning against the counter as he wrote a note in my file. "How's your stress level? Any headaches? Fatigue?" "Always," I joked, though it was only half in jest. "But nothing serious. I'm fine." His eyes met mine, his expression softening. "You're allowed to not be fine, you know." Something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. It wasn't just the words, it was the warmth behind them, the way he seemed to really mean it. I looked away quickly, brushing it off. "I promise. I'm managing," I said with a forced smile. The appointment went on as usual, but as he checked my pulse, his fingers lingering on my wrist, I felt an odd flutter in my chest. When he listened to my breathing, his face close to mine, I was suddenly aware of how long it had been since someone had looked at me like that. Or maybe I was imagining it. "Everything looks good," he said finally, stepping back. "Just remember to take care of yourself too, not just everyone else." I nodded, avoiding his gaze as I gathered my things. "Thanks, Dr. Harper. I'll try." He held the door open for me, and as I walked past, I felt his eyes linger for just a moment longer than usual. Or maybe I was imagining that too. I couldn't stop thinking about that appointment. It wasn't anything Dr. Harper had done. He'd been perfectly professional, polite, even kind. But something had shifted. I caught myself replaying our conversation in my head while folding laundry or sitting at stoplights. The way he'd said, "You're allowed to not be fine," had stuck with me, like a whisper I couldn't shake. A week later, I had to call the clinic about some test results. It was nothing serious, just routine paperwork, but when the receptionist told me Dr. Harper would call me back directly, I felt that flutter again. I told myself it was silly. He was just doing his job. But that didn't stop me from nervously checking my phone every hour, as though I were waiting for something far more important than a doctor's call. When his number finally appeared on the screen, my heart leapt, and I forced myself to calm down before I answered. "Mrs. Taylor, this is Dr. Harper." "Hi, yes. Thanks for calling me back," I said, trying to sound casual. His voice was warm, steady. "I just wanted to let you know that everything looks perfectly fine. Nothing to worry about at all." "Good," I said, exhaling. "That's a relief." There was a small pause on the line before he added, "You've seemed a little distracted lately. Is everything all right outside of this?" The question caught me off guard. I let out a small, nervous laugh. "You mean I seem like a typical overstressed mom?" "I wouldn't put it that way," he replied lightly, but then his tone shifted, a little softer. I just want to make sure you're okay." That moment stretched longer than it should have. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like he cared, like he noticed. And I couldn't remember the last time someone had done that. "I'm fine," I said eventually, though I knew I didn't sound convincing. "Really?" "All right," he replied gently. "But if you ever need to talk, I'm here." It was such a simple thing to say, but it lingered in my mind long after the call ended. That evening, as I cooked dinner and listened to the hum of my husband's voice in the other room, I realized I was distracted by a man I barely knew beyond the exam room, and I didn't know what to do about it. I told myself I wouldn't see him again unless I had to, but life, as always, had other plans. A week later, I was hit with a nagging pain in my shoulder that wouldn't go away. My husband, forever practical, told me to get it checked out, so I booked an appointment at the clinic, hoping Dr. Harper wouldn't be the one to see me. But when I walked into the exam room, there he was. "Lisa," he said, his voice calm but with something unreadable beneath it. "Back again?" I nodded, avoiding his gaze as I sat on the edge of the table. "Just a pulled muscle, probably. I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not a bother," he said simply, rolling his stool closer. "Let's take a look." He moved behind me, his hands firm but gentle as he pressed along my shoulder, searching for the source of the pain. I held my breath, trying to focus on the sterile smell of the room or the soft hum of the lights, but it was impossible. I could feel the heat of his presence behind me, the weight of the silence between us. "Does this hurt?" he asked quietly, his fingers lingering at the base of my neck. "A little," I managed to say, though it wasn't the pain I was feeling. He didn't move right away, his hands hovering there for a moment too long, his breath so close I could almost feel it against my hair. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew he could hear it. How could he not? "Lisa," he said softly, and there it was again, that voice, the one that made me feel like I wasn't invisible, like he saw right through me. I turned to face him, and suddenly we were too close, his eyes locked on mine, searching, asking a question neither of us should have been asking. I could feel the tension building, pressing down on both of us, daring us to cross a line we had no business approaching, and I almost let it happen. I almost leaned in, almost gave in to whatever this was that had been building between us. For one fleeting second, I wanted nothing more than to feel his lips against mine, to forget about the life I had waiting for me outside this room. But then I pulled back. "I can't," I whispered, my voice shaking. He blinked, his expression unreadable, but he didn't try to argue. Instead, he nodded, his voice steady when he finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That was unprofessional." "It's not your fault," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't that simple. I stood up quickly, grabbing my bag and avoiding his gaze as I made my way to the door. I could feel his eyes on me as I left, and it took everything in me not to turn around. When I got to my car, I sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the wheel as I tried to steady my breath. I knew what had almost happened in that room, and the weight of it sat heavy on my chest. I thought of my husband, my kids, the life I'd built, and I knew I couldn't let a moment of weakness destroy all of it. I never went back to Dr. Harper's clinic after that. I found a new doctor, made excuses to my husband about the change, and buried the memory of that afternoon deep inside me. But sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself thinking about him, about what almost happened, about what it would have felt like to let go, just once. And then I'd roll over, close my eyes, and remind myself of the life I chose, the life that was mine to protect. Click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to our channel for more real and true stories like this.